Good evening, beautiful people. So tonight I've got a excerpt that I want to read from a really awesome book. I highly recommend you pick it up. I will give it the caveat though that this is not a book that you could read in one sitting. In fact, in the preface to the book it recommends that you read it once quickly and then read it again very, very slowly, like over the course of 10 weeks slowly. And it's not a very big book, so it's definitely a lot to bite off and chew, and it makes it really, really great for study. This book is called Spiritual Direction by Henry Nouwen. This is a really cool book because it's actually not directly written by him. It kind of is, but it's a compilation of a bunch of his works and writings over his entire life. If you've ever read one of his books before, all of his books are just jam-packed with so much good information, so much good analysis. He's really good at diving into spiritual mumbo-jumbo and, and dissecting it and giving us new ways to think about spirituality, especially spiritual disciplines, in my opinion. But yeah, this is a compilation of his works. A bunch of his students, he was a professor and a priest. A bunch of his students said, well, he's taught a lot on this subject, and he was somebody that we went to regularly for spiritual direction, but he never actually wrote a book and published a book on this topic. He has published tons of books, but that's not one that he published. And so they took a whole bunch of his writings and compiled them into this book. And it's an insanely cool book. I really recommend you go after it. So it's Spiritual Direction, but I'm going to read an excerpt from it. It's in chapter 8 of this book. So an old Hasidic tale summarizes the need to move from solitude to community in the spiritual life in order to find our true home in the world. And this Hasidic tale is Darkness in Dawn. The rabbi asked his students, how can we determine the hour of dawn, when the night ends and the day begins? One of the rabbi's students suggested, when from a distance you can distinguish between a dog and a sheep? No, was the answer of the rabbi. It is when one can distinguish between a fig tree and a grapevine? Asked a second student. No, the rabbi said. Please tell us the answer then, said the students. It is then, said the wise teacher, when you can look into the face of another human being, and you have enough light in you to recognize your brother or your sister. Until then, it is night, and darkness is still with us. The spiritual journey moves us from solitude to community and to ministry as we follow Jesus. This movement is exemplified in the beautiful story of Jesus and his disciples in Luke 6:12 through 19. The story of relationship begins in solitude at night, moves to community building in the morning, and ends in active ministry in the afternoon. Jesus went out to a mountainside to pray and spent the night praying to God. When morning came, he called his disciples to him and chose 12 of them, whom he also designated apostles. He went down with them and stood on a level place. A large crowd of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by evil spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him, because power was coming from him and healing them all. Jesus spent time on the mountain at night in solitary prayer. He came down in the morning and formed his community. Then in the afternoon, with his apostles, he went out and healed the sick and proclaimed the good news. I've been fascinated by the sequence of prayer at night, community in the morning, ministry in the afternoon. Notice the order, from solitude to community to ministry. The night is for solitude, the morning for community, the afternoon for ministry. Night, morning, and afternoon are symbols for the movement from solitude to community to ministry that Jesus lived out. These are the three disciplines we are called to practice on the long journey home. solitude or communion with God in prayer. 2. Recognizing and gathering together in community. And 3. Ministry or compassion in the world. So that's just a short excerpt from this book. But as you can see, it's such a profound thought. I think it's a really cool idea that he recognized that there's this pattern linked with solitude. We need that time to recharge. We need that time to commune with God, to understand His intentions for our life, to understand what He wants us to do. And then we need to go out and seek community, because we're better in community, we're better in fellowship. I think any of us can tell each other that after a pandemic that's left us really isolated. We know that we do so much better in community. We can get so much more done. We are healthier emotionally and mentally, and God intended for us to be in community. And that means a lot of things. That means how we work together. It means how we interact and how we treat each other. There's a lot of things that are important in how you define community, I think. And then once you form that community, you got to go out and do ministry. You can't just stay in your little bubble, in your nice little comfortable community with all your potlucks and your traditions. You got to actually go out and do ministry. And ministry sometimes is not the most comfortable thing. God is really, really good at stretching us and taking us to the next level in our faith. He's really good at almost testing us, making us test our boundaries a little bit, putting us outside our comfort zone, because He knows that that will help us grow. It's so important that we go forward and do ministry. In fact, there's an entire Great Commission written about the fact that we need to go out. We can't just stay and sit in our designated pew of the century and keep doing what we're doing. We have to get out of the motions. We have to go do ministry, and ministry is not always going to be easy. Sometimes it is, though. I mean, sometimes ministry is really, really enjoyable, but sometimes it's hard, and we have to be honest with ourselves about that, I think, and be prepared to go forward and do whatever He calls us to do. So that's all for this little grain of thought today. I encourage you to think and meditate on this, pray on it. Ask God, how can I improve on these 3 areas? How can I improve upon my prayer life? How can I improve upon my building of community? And how can I improve upon my acting out in ministry? See if you can't find, are there any weaknesses in any one of these 3 areas? I think it's really important for us to seek out those weaknesses in ourselves, because everybody has them, whether we like to admit it or not. It's good for us to identify them and then work to fix them. Not identify them in others. That's for another lesson. We're not doing that today. We're taking the log out of our own eye first. So make sure we're taking that time to be introspective and be better. And with that, I'll see you all later. Bye.